Welcome to Face the State. I'm Ariana Bennett. Thank you for joining us. Well, of the 64,000 students in the Washoe County School District, about 9,000 are considered in need of special education plans. Now, it's a big number that provides a lot of challenges to a district, and Washoe County has struggled to get some performance indicators within this group up to standard. Washoe County School District Deputy Superintendent Kristen McNeil and Washoe County Chief Student Services Officer Byron Green are here now to talk about this with us. Thank you both so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having us.
Okay, so when we say 9,000 students with what's called an IEP, you want to explain what that means, what an IEP is?
Yeah, sure. First of all, thank you for having us. An IEP, for those who in the community may not know what that means, it's an individualized educational plan. And if a child is suspected of having a disability, either by the parents and family or somebody at the school, the evaluations are conducted, and then if a disability is discovered, the team that supports that child comes together and creates this plan. And that includes the family, includes the teacher, the special education teacher, and any other adult who may need to provide support for that student to make sure that we are providing specially designed instruction in addition to the grade level content to help that child succeed.
And I know these agreements, they're legally binding, right? It's
Yes.
something that everybody gets together and agrees upon, and then that has to be carried out within the classroom.
That's correct.
So can you kind of give me an example of what these can include, how it will change a child's course through their education?
Well, the whole focus is support for the child, and that's individualized, depending on the child's disability. So for example, if a child has a disability of a specific learning disability, maybe like dyslexia, where they struggle with learning to decode and their reading, the individualized plan may set specific goals that may provide support in addition to what the child is receiving in, let's say, their first grade classroom. So they may have a teacher come in, provide very specialized design instruction for that child in addition to what they're receiving from their classroom teacher.
And this is very important because, as we know, kids don't work on an assembly line. Every kid's different. But how does the district as a whole manage the added cost, both in time and money, to make sure these kids are getting what they need?
So we actually have a very substantial budget for special education. So our budget's around $83 million, and that's a combination of sources of federal dollars, state dollars, and then local dollars as well. And that's an actual increase of over $10 million from our last fiscal year. So it does provide, it's a large amount of money, but to educate a special education child, it does take additional services, and we want to make sure that we're providing those services not only in accordance with the law, but just as Dr. Green said, that meets the needs of the individual child.
How well would you say that's working right now?
Well, I'll start off. I think that we're doing some great types of things within our school district. We're providing professional development for our teachers. We're providing professional development for our principals. We want to make sure that they have the supports that they need in order to carry out the IEP. And with the direction that Superintendent Davis has given as far as making sure that special education is a priority within our school district, that's an oil tanker that we have to shift, and it's a culture change as well. So under Dr. Green's leadership, we've been able to put in a lot of those types of processes, but it's not something that happens in 1 year. It's a multi-year process.
And if I can also add, obviously the goal and hope for every child, whether they have a disability or not, is to make sure that they reach that graduation line, that they're prepared to go to college, a career, join the community. And the graduation rate we have right now with special education students is not acceptable. And I think Superintendent Davis has made that very clear when we started this work almost 2 years ago. And as Deputy Superintendent stated, this is not an easy fix. We didn't get here overnight, but I am very, very optimistic of many of the things that we have accomplished the last year and a half.
So you agree that the needle needs to move. How much does it need to move? Where do you want it to be compared to where you are now?
Well, I think our superintendent has set the goal of 90 by 20 for our school district. I think the expectation has been set. I think the challenge is when you actually look at systemic change. For example, we had the opportunity to have an outside organization come in and evaluate our work in special education, to really have an independent view to say, what do we need to do to improve outcomes for students with disabilities? And all of their focus areas, they listed 5 with a stretch run, and their focus really is about the systemic change. And for any of our viewers who have been involved in large organizations of even 64,000 students, with thousands of staff and our community and our families, systemic change is a long-term fix. So while we're seeing very hopeful and optimistic signs already, we know this is not just a simple 1 year and we're done.
Okay, now the term systemic change is kind of fuzzy in terms of what specifically that means on the ground. So what examples do you have of specific things that need to change?
Sure. So when you talk about students with disabilities, the first thing I want to put out there is that our students, even those with disabilities, go to a school. They're in a classroom with a teacher, they have a principal of the school. That is the focus of learning for all of our children. So when we talk about special education, I think many people think it's the special education department, when really it's the teacher interacting and teaching that child in that classroom. So a strong systemic support, I think Deputy Superintendent mentioned, is professional learning. Are our teachers receiving appropriate, timely, professional learning at various times of the year and even in their classroom every day? If they are struggling with a student academically, behaviorally, socially, do they have the support to have somebody come in their classrooms and model and guide them? Our principals who are leading the IEP meetings, are they supported so they can make sure that the needs of families, students, and the staff are met? So I think those are just two small out of many examples of that. Our role is to make sure we're providing that support for students, families, and schools.
Now, a big part of that, keeping teachers up to date on training, is teacher retention. And I know that that's been an issue. So how do you plan on retaining good teachers longer than you currently are?
So with the help of the state, we've been able to provide incentives. So, and it goes all the way to hiring. It goes all the way to recruitment. We want to make sure that we have the most highly effective teachers in front of all of our students, but particularly in the areas, and it's a special needs area when we're talking about special education. So we're providing different types of incentives. We're providing different types of, if you can come into the school district and go into our options program. But it's all about making sure that we have the best and the brightest teachers in front of our students. And when we're facing on a national level, this is not just a Washoe County issue, and it's not just a Nevada issue. It is a national issue as far as recruitment and retention of teachers. So we're trying to put processes in place to make sure that our teachers are receiving all of the support that they need. And it's not only new teachers, it's also veteran teachers. Because as Dr. Green has said, you know, these types of processes, they change, and I may have had a student with one particular type of disability. I may not have had another student that comes into my classroom, and I'm responsible for that student, so I need to make sure that I'm receiving all of the professional development that I can.
Okay.
If I could also add to that, I think teaching is a very, very hard job. It's very taxing, but our teachers really are giving everything they can to their children. So I think in many ways we also retain teachers by listening to them and really understanding their concerns and trying to address those concerns. So for example, this last year we held about 10 town hall meetings for our teachers, general education and special education teachers, to come in and tell us what they think needs to be done, to tell us what their concerns are, and really just give them an opportunity to speak their mind, and knowing that if teachers feel supported every day in that classroom and at a district level, we know that they're going to probably be better apt to stay.
Okay. Well, looking at the graduation rate for students with disabilities, it was 29% last year.
That's correct.
It's a low number. What is a feasible high? What's the goal?
Well, I don't know if you want to go first. You want me?
No, go right ahead.
For me, I think almost all of our students with disabilities deserve that opportunity for a standard diploma. So from my perspective, the goal would be just as anything for any other child. I know that the graduation expectation is 90% by 20. I don't think just because a child has a disability we should have any lower expectations for them.
Okay. So why is it only 29% then? If it's possible, why only 29?
Well, I think for many reasons. For me, I think first of all our district has acknowledged there's lots of systemic change. I think nationally, Dr. McNeil mentioned, educating students with various disabilities, physical disabilities, intellectual disabilities. I think this challenge of making sure that we can individualize education for students is not a simple task. Teachers in a first grade classroom are teaching 20 different students, and then you may have students with disabilities who may even have a greater need of support. And we have that responsibility to provide that support in a very thoughtful and coordinated way to make sure that it is student-focused, not adult-focused.
Okay. Now, I know a big part of any student's education is going to be their parent getting involved. I know this is particularly important with special education. Parents advocating for their kids is hugely important. Recently, within the school district, we've seen parents advocating to the point of suing the school district over various complaints, and we've seen the school district settle a lot of these lawsuits. What is going on there with all these lawsuits? I mean, is this indicative of that systemic change that needs to happen, or is this a problem with parents having unrealistic expectations?
I don't know if I would say unrealistic. I mean, having a child is one of the most important jobs that a parent does, and so you're advocating for your child, and you want to make sure that your child is receiving the services. So at one point, I do believe that it's part of an education process, and that's part of the district's responsibility as far as educating the parent as well as the school as far as what are the rights and responsibilities for everybody sitting around that IEP team, because it's a team decision. And so not only do the teachers and the principal have to be provided that service, but we also have to make sure that our parents have all of that knowledge and that they're their child's first advocate. And I want to go back a little bit to the graduation rate, because it's not only about making sure that students are receiving the services, but it's also making sure that they have access to the same curriculum that all children have. And that's important because when we are writing that IEP, we want to make sure that that's embedded as part of the IEP process.
If I could also add, we started this almost 2 years ago, and we believe that there is no possible way that this change can happen without our families, without our community, and without our schools and our teachers. We've worked really hard this last year to engage families in a different way, but I think as a district we didn't do a good enough job as in the past. If you are a family and your child has a disability and you go to this IEP team meeting, you can walk in and you could be full in a room of 12 to 14 other adults that are talking language that you may not understand or may have been exposed to before. It can be very intimidating. So we're really working hard to not only build families' advocacy and understanding of their rights so they can support their child, but really build relationships. Because I think at the end of the day, if we're all focused on helping that child, making sure that child succeeds, then we're going to be able to build a relationship and support and work collaboratively with that family rather than have a contentious relationship.
So is there the expectation then that as you implement these changes, you'll see fewer lawsuits from parents?
That is the absolute hope, but better relationships with families, fewer lawsuits, better outcomes for students. Again, focusing in on what's best for the child, not necessarily what adults, kind of those adult issues that get in the way.
Okay. All right. What other major changes should the public know about?
Well, I'll just say that I think that we have some really great things happening within our school district. We've got professional learning courses, our nationally recognized parent university. So we were talking about parent support. We have great classes free of charge with daycare that provide opportunities for parents to learn more about what is an IEP. And that is a scary process, coming in and having your child identified. But there's great things going on in our school district, and we are very optimistic about how we're going to turn this oil tanker around.
Okay. We just have a little bit of time left, but I did want to touch on this a little bit. There's been kind of a national movement away from isolating students with disabilities from the general population. My understanding is that Washoe County does this on a case-by-case basis, whether it puts them in the general population of students or puts them in a specific special ed classroom or even a specific special ed school. Is there any initiative to change that protocol?
Great question, and I think based upon what federal law requires and how we support students with disabilities, this gets very confusing and appears that somebody's making a decision to pull a child out and put them somewhere else. The expectation in the Washoe County School District, and I would imagine in any school district across the country, is that we want all of our students to be in the regular classroom accessing the grade level content as long as it is appropriate with that IEP. And I think we have to make sure we're focusing on the individual student needs. We want children to be in that classroom, but I think the example we gave earlier, if the child has a disability that requires maybe some additional support, we may have to have that support provided. In special education language, it's called least restrictive environment. We as educators are required by federal law to make sure that we're starting in the general education classroom, and then if based upon the student's needs, required to then go to a more restrictive environment.
Okay, all right, well, we are out of time, but thank you both so much for your time.
Thank you so
appreciate
much.
Thank you for having
very
us.
much.
All right, well, coming up on Face the State, I will sit down with Washoe County Superintendent Tracy Davis to find out what this new school year holds, the good, the bad, and the ugly. It's right after the break.